Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Another episode of Dad to Dad brought to you by the National Parents Union. We got a good one for you today. We got a special guest that we're going to bring on. But before I do that, just want to introduce myself. I'm John Monteleone, father of Antonia and Rochelle Monteleone, and incredibly proud son of Lynette and Joseph Monteleone. And I'll introduce our co-host here. Tim, we'll start with you, then we'll move on to Jose and then Mike.
Hey guys, good to see you again. Hope you're all having a great week. I'm Tim Lang of the National Parents Union, proud son of Patty and Jimmy Langan, and incredibly proud father of Matthew, Miles, David, Max, and Dylan. Glad to be here.
Hey everybody, buenos dias, good morning. My name is Dr. Jose Manuel Villarreal, coming from San Diego, and I'm the proud father of Nathan Macario and Noah Manuel, and the son of Jose Macario, the late Jose Macario, rest in peace, and my mother who's still asleep down the hallway here, Maria Irene, my teenage mother. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Michael Scott, son of Vasti and Rashida Scott, proud father of Addison and Grayson Scott, and husband to Megan.
So fellas, I just kind of wanted to frame our guest for today, Fidel Montero. I have a friend that I met in the National Institute of Latino School Leaders. His name is Jose Enriquez, and we just spent 2 years together in the same fellowship. So we got some time to just talk about growing up and just being fathers, and we shared stories. And he was just telling me about being a son of an immigrant, how his mother raised him, and just a powerful story that he had. And how he uses his gifts and talents and pays it forward through his program, Latinos in Action. And so he's someone that I wanted to kind of highlight on the Dad to Dad show, but unfortunately due to scheduling conflicts, he couldn't make it today. But he reached out to me, he said, John, he was like, I have an amazing friend. His name is Fidel Montero, and he just has an incredible, inspiring story as well. And he said, he could fill in for me until I could come on to the show maybe next week. And so that's how we have Fidel here. And Fidel, we just want to introduce you, and we just want to hear about your story, man, growing up and just, what you've been through as a young man and maturing into fatherhood, and, how it shapes how you approach life and raise your kids.
All righty. Well, hey, what's going on, fellas? Thanks for having me this morning. It's still morning here in Utah. Grateful to be here. Grateful for the work that y'all are doing. Fatherhood is, you said I'm a mature father, and I don't know if I would describe myself as that. I'm still learning every single day. I have 5 amazing kids. Maiva, who's my oldest, Tane, who is a freshman in high school this year. And then I have a daughter, Naomi, who's in 6th grade, Josiah, who's going into 2nd, and then a little surprise one, little baby Rio, who's running around with diapers still, man. So I got the range. And I grew up in a proud home. My mother, Imelda Montero, and my father, Fidel. So I'm actually the third. Both immigrated here to the U.S. from a little small town in Mexico, in Colima, Mexico. And that's sort of where my story starts. I mean, my parents were migrant workers, and as Dr. Villarreal knows, California, the backbone of California and the framework of California has been built by people like my parents, and I'm sure like yours, Jose. They immigrated here in the early 70s, started a family, and interestingly enough, when I was about 2 years old, our family actually went back to Mexico. So I'm a U.S. citizen, but my earlier memories of childhood were in Mexico. That's where I grew up, and Spanish is my first language. I didn't learn English until I came back to the States late into childhood. I was about 12 years old, going into adolescence, and we immigrated to a little farming community in Northern California with about 2,000 people. It's interesting because when people think of California, they think of Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. You know what I'm saying? But there are thousands of small communities throughout the state that are more rural. They're small farming communities, and that's where I grew up. The town where I grew up was tiny. I mean, my graduating class had 26 kids, believe it or not. And in some ways that was a blessing, right? Because I think you couldn't hide, when you only have 26 people in your graduating class, you cannot hide. And no matter how inadequate the resources were at the school, the sort of the most important component of people knowing you, that was in place. So that's where I grew up. We grew up when I came to the U.S. We lived in a labor camp. California has a lot of labor camps throughout the state, and we moved into a little cinder block, 2-bedroom home with a family of 5. I have 4 sisters, 4 strong Latina sisters. I think one of them's listening right now. And they, and it was me. So 4 girls and then me. And, we didn't have a lot, man. We didn't have a lot of resources. My dad, again, was a migrant worker. So I don't think in his entire adulthood, he earned over $20,000 a year. I mean, it was a tough upbringing. I still remember him telling me to answer the phone because he knew it was the bill collectors, So, so I'd pick up the phone for him and tell him he wasn't home, and to stop calling. But life was good though, man. I mean, we didn't have much, but in terms of family, I grew up with a very loving parents. And we laughed a lot, like my dad was one of the funniest guys, as Jose would tell you, Latino dads, they give everybody a nickname. You know what I'm saying? So everybody who would walk into our house had a nickname, you know what I'm saying? And, one of the values that my father taught me just was how to work, man. It was that the guy was incredibly hardworking. I don't remember a day as a teenager, as a young kid, ever getting up before my father did. I mean, he was always up. He was always moving. My memories of sort of early adolescence when I was in middle school and so forth are with working with my dad, going on the fields and working in the peaches, walnuts. And, it was back then, I didn't realize the, the impact it would have on me and the way that it would shape me as a man. But, that experience just, I mean, it makes me who I am today. Having this memory of my dad walking in after a 12-hour shift on a tractor covered in dirt, it basically just his mouth, clear because that's where he would put on his handkerchief, but the rest of his body was covered in dirt, and him being happy about it, being grateful that he had a job, being grateful that, he could contribute to the home. And my mother was equally hardworking, man. To this day, she's in her 70s, and this is the first year she didn't work in, she works at it's a factory where they produce peaches. I always tell my staff, I'm a principal now here in Salt Lake, in Utah. And I tell my staff, those little peaches, they just don't fall, from manna, like manna from heaven, somebody has to put them together. And it's my mother who does that. But this year, because of the, just because of the risk of the coronavirus, she didn't work, man. And we encouraged her not to do it. But about a week ago, she called me. She's like, ¿Qué estaba pensando listening to you? What was I thinking listening to you, man? She's like, I am bored. I want to be working. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, my mother, equally hardworking, equally amazing, and had a profound influence on me. So in high school, so school was, I moved, like I said, when I moved here when I was about 12, school was tough, man. I mean, in part, I had no idea. I didn't speak English, and being a learner who's navigating not just your family move, which has a lot of sort of emotion to that, and reconnecting with my father, because when we were in Mexico, my dad was actually working here in the States. So that whole experience, right, was new. But then you add language on top of that. It was a tough transition, man. So I tell my students now, I actually didn't read my first book till probably my junior year in high school, like no joke. And somehow I navigated, I guess it was charisma or something, man, because my teachers just passed me along, you know what I mean? I learned that if you smile enough in school, and if you're nice enough to your teachers, man, you get through, and it worked until my junior year, till I had a teacher actually make me read a book, but academically, I didn't see myself as an academically inclined student. If anything, I had confidence in other areas, but in academics, my confidence level was very low. So I masked that, you know what I mean? I masked it with, you know, being the cool kid, or you know, the clown in the class, that sort of stuff. And that's how I sort of mastered it, until I had adults that actually said, no, you know what, you can actually learn, man, and let's help you. So my senior year in high school, I had a teacher who actually encouraged me to take an AP class. And you know, at the time, man, I didn't AP. I was like, what is that, man? I had no clue what it was. I don't even know if I knew how to spell AP, you know. But I got into this AP econ class, and I did well with it. And that teacher, Mr. Wagner, man, I still remember him, had such an influence. And he started to give me confidence in my academic ability, that I can actually learn. And you know, as an adult, as I look back now, that's the time that, you know, that was about 7 years since I had moved here from Mexico. And by that time, that's when you're starting to develop your academic, you know, language as a second language learner. So all of a sudden, you know, stuff started to make sense, man. The words that I was reading in English started to make sense. And I started to gain confidence. And through some fantastic programs in the state of California that targeted first-gen kids to get us to college, I was able to go to a program at Cal State Chico through what was called a summer bridge, part of the MECHA program at the time. And I got to tell you, I'm a product of affirmative action, man. I know there's a lot of debate about the benefits of that or not, but a lot of the kids from my from the neighbor, or from the area that I'm from, they went to a JC for about 6 months to a year, and then they dropped out. And junior colleges, as you guys know, they are a pit that with no return for especially for children of color. So fortunately, through this affirmative action program for first gen kids, I was able to go to the university at Cal State Chico, and you know, it opened up a whole new world, man. It opened up a whole new world. That has led me now to, you know, a couple of principalships, leading two of the largest schools in the state of Utah. I've also been the chief of staff at the biggest university in the state, completed a doctoral degree at Columbia University. And I mean, if you would have told me I would have had those experiences when I was 17, if you would have said, hey, you're going to do all these things, you're going to have these 5 amazing kids, married to an incredible life partner, there's no way I would have believed that, man. But that's, you know, we can go into more detail, but that's sort of a synopsis of where I've been, man.
Fidel, what drove you in education? Like, why education? Why did you choose that field, that profession?
No, that's a great question, John. Thank you. So when I finally got serious about school, I was like, look, who makes the most money, right? Because you know, my family was broke. So I'm like, I'm the first one to go to college. I'm going to make some money. And I actually started studying economics. And because of that teacher that I had in my senior year, and I had confidence in that subject. So I was like, okay, I'll do econ, and then maybe I'll go be a stockbroker. You know what I'm saying? So when I was a sophomore in college, or by my junior year, I was going down that path. And I was actually working at an elementary school as a playground supervisor. That was like my job, you know. I was just enough money to, you know, pay for whatever. And it happened to be one of the most highly impacted schools in the state of Utah that I was at. It was an elementary school with about 95% of the children are children of color. Same amount, you know, live in homes that live below the poverty line. So really impacted school, but I loved it, man. Those little kids, I connected with them. Play basketball with them, you know, I'd hang out with them in the lunchroom. It was really, you know, really a simple job. And what I didn't realize is that they were one of the first schools that in Utah was going through some really significant school improvement processes. And they were working in partnership with a group out of Los Angeles called the Urban Learning Centers, which it was a framework that the Los Angeles Educational Partnership was promoting. And anyway, so they were working with those guys, and so on a weekday, I was just in the playground, and I noticed this little woman was walking around. I didn't know who she was, so I stopped her. I was like, "Ma'am, can I help you? You know, you shouldn't be here." You know, I was playing my role, right? I was protecting the kids, and it happened to be Dr. Greta Pruitt, who was the director of the Urban Learning Centers and who was the former director of curriculum in Los Angeles Unified School District. That was who that lady was. So we made you know, we started a conversation, and she's like, what are you doing for, you know, what's your story? So we talked, and then she's like, hey, I want you to do an internship with me. And I was like, doing what? She's like, well, just don't worry about that. We'll figure it out when you get to Los Angeles. I was like, LA? So to make a long story short, man, she invited me to do an internship, and I ended up working in downtown LA with the urban, with the group, the Urban Learning Centers. And I started doing comprehensive school reform work with schools in Compton, California, South Central, East Los Angeles, and in the San Fernando Valley. And my primary job was to work with Latino parents and African-American parents, trying to build some cohesion with those groups, because there was a lot of tension, especially in Compton and in these areas that were demographically changing. There just wasn't a lot of understanding between these two groups, and language was a barrier. So I created a language class that taught Black parents how to speak Spanish and Latino parents how to speak English, but they did it in together around the premise of parenting, actually. And here I was, man, 22 years old, working with principals, working with former superintendents. And I got to tell you, man, that changed my worldview. And there was this gravity pull towards the field of education. I mean, it was like, it was crazy, man, being there. So I just said a prayer, and I was like, okay, God, if you really want me to do this, you better take care of my family, man. Because if I'm going to go teach for a while, you know, because my whole aspiration was to help my parents out, you know, once I went to college. So that's how I got into the field. I came back to school that fall. I switched my major from econ to social studies, because that's where all the credits transferred. And I started teaching, you know, a couple of years after that.
So Fidel, I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
You know, John, Mike, and Tim and I have talked a lot about our upbringing and how it shaped our lives in our own first generation experiences. But as a dad, how are you going to replicate that experience you had with your children who now have access to life? So how are you challenged with that? How are you, so for a new dad who's a first gen, what advice would you give them to maybe replicate it somehow? I
gotta tell you, brother, that is perhaps the one question I wrestle with the most. Because I think all of us probably on this show grew up with very little privilege. And we grew up, you know, probably if we were to talk your stories, there's probably a lot of parallels with mine. And now as a father, now, you know, I'm privileged, man. I mean, you know, I'm in my office here in my work. I make a good living. There's some status with the job that comes in the community, and my kids benefit from that privilege. You know, oh, are you Dr. Montero's, you know, daughter, Dr. Montero's son? And all of a sudden they're privileged. So we have a lot of conversation in our home about what privilege means, and the fact that it's hard for me, because obviously I cannot replicate the experiences that I had with my own kids, just because how do you replicate poverty once you sort of have climbed out of it? And I got to tell you, man, for especially for men of color, I think for me anyways, it has been a real sort of dilemma when once you achieve a certain level of success, if you may, you almost feel guilty. You almost feel guilty, and you're like, damn, you know, I shouldn't have this nice home, or I shouldn't, you know, whatever. So as a parent, you know, your mind plays tricks on you, man. If you remember that song, you know. Oh, yeah. So my mind plays tricks on me, man, with how do I help my children, you know, with this privilege that we have, and yet with what I know makes me who I am, right? So a lot of it, Jose, is a lot of conversation with them, man. We try to, my wife and I, we have some guiding principles, you know, that we've created as family, that we try to help our children to understand. I think we value doing hard things in our home, right, with our kids. Now, I get it that the hard things for my kids are going to look a little bit differently than the hard things that I experience. But any opportunity where they have to struggle a little bit, where they have to be, you know, in a situation that's stressful, then we let them wrestle with that, you know. But you know, and we try to connect the memory the experiences that we had with their own. But again, that's a constant dilemma for me, that I'm not sure if I fully have understood how to do it, but that's what I try to do, man.
I wrote an article on my LinkedIn page called Survivor's Remorse. Survivor's Remorse and Latinx school leaders, 3 ideas to support them. So that you hit it on the head. It's there's this remorse that you've survived what you've done.
Yeah.
You know, and not survive to be alive, but survive through your potential, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I was curious, because I know we've talked about that on this panel before. Yeah, it's really interesting. I have a question. I'm sorry, John. This made me really,
please.
This made me really think. So, Mike, in your position, because it is that town you're in, are you going to face that similar thing with your children as they grow up? That, oh, you must be Mr. So-and-so's kids, huh? Have you felt that at all yet? By any?
Well, so I've felt that as a child. So my dad is a prominent person in our community. And for years it was, oh, you're Vassie's son? Wait a minute, you're Vassie's son? And so I've lived that to a degree. And the funny part is, you know, as I've gotten into, you know, education and kind of, I don't know, made a name for myself, my dad would come and visit the schools, and, you know, kids of course would say, Mr. Scott, and he would turn, think they were talking to him, but they were talking to me. So things start to shift. So yeah, I am aware that, you know, at some point, you know, that will be something for my kids to experience. But, you know, going back to what Fidel said around those core principles, right? So you have those core principles in your home, and when your children leave the home, hopefully those core principles are embedded in them. But also know that they're going to make mistakes along the way, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
I'm experience a little bit of that right now. Like, you know, you make mistakes, you know, and sometimes those mistakes stay with you for a while, but, you know, can you step forward each day, know what your principles are, and try to stay true to those as much as possible. So that's what I want to, you know, inspire within my kids.
So Fidel, like along your journey, when did you become a father?
Early, man. We were, in fact, my wife and I are, you know, we look back now and like, man, what were we thinking? You know, we were in our, so we were 24, man, when our baby was born. And you know, she's going to be 18 now, man. And yeah, so we were young. We were unexperienced. And I almost feel like I have to apologize to her now as she's grown into adulthood because of every mistake that we made along the way. But one of the things that as a parent, I've realized as a father is that you have very little control over your children. And, you know, at first, especially as a father of color, you want to do everything right because you feel this obligation, you feel this sort of sense of like, hey, you know, I owe it to my kid to, you know, make everything right for them. And you want to control everything. You want to control the environment. You want to control, you know, when they're happy, and then when they're sad, you want to control those things. And it's taken me a while to realize that, look, you have very little control over those things. And once you figure out that, and you let go of that sort of tendency to want to control your children's outcomes, magic happens, man. You know, and beautiful things happen in your relationship with your kids once you let go of that control, and you lead with example, and you lead with sort of words of advice when they come to you, your kids. But yeah, I was 24, man, when our baby was born, who's now 18.
So Fidel, I got to ask you, because we a lot of times we put this out in the show to new fathers or younger fathers. Is there advice you could give to fathers who are in their early to mid 20s? Because I got to tell you something, man. If I had babies in my early to mid 20s right now, oof, I don't know if they would have made it through the first couple of years. So you don't have to put them on the spot, but is there something you can impart from your experience that new or younger fathers can use?
But, you know, one piece of advice that I didn't quite get when I was younger was about the importance to maintain my relationship with my partner. And because children changes, it just changes the dynamic of your relationship. And if you're fortunate enough to be in a relationship with the mother of your children, it is so crucial that you maintain sort of, I don't want to say separate them, but you have to be really attentive, and you have to be intentional about developing your relationship with your partner. And one thing, I kid you not, I wish I would have had when I was 24 was counseling, partner counseling at the time. I've experienced it now, as you know, later on, but it's like a lot of people look at counseling with this sort of lens of stigma. But if you look at counseling, that's the same way we look at going to the gym or exercising or just improving yourself. Man, imagine how many relationships would be stronger or stay together because you have the skill on how to communicate with each other. You have skills about how to discuss intimacy, finances, and so forth. And when you're 24, man, you're not even thinking, at least I wasn't thinking about those things. I was like, man, how do I take care of this kid, man? So I wish somebody would have said, Fidel and Nancy, get into some counseling early so you guys can develop good skills so you can develop your own relationship, and then collectively you address how you parent your children. So every father out there, man, in fact, we ought to be partnering with some counselors out there that can be, you know, giving these dads some early counseling, early coaching.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that on the show, the benefits of therapy and counseling. It's not something we're ashamed of. I've never heard anyone come back and say, I regret having gone to therapy or counseling.
Well, and imagine going into it, you know, early in your relationship when you haven't faced some of the challenges that for sure are going to come. So, you know, my wife and I, we're getting to the point now, instead of giving people gifts when they get married, we give them some counseling sessions, you know?
So I know, Fidel, when I was a young professional and father, my wife at the time had to make a lot of sacrifices for me to further my education and get a couple master's degrees. I mean, so is that kind of what you and Nancy went through, where, you know, being young, 24, new father, you know, climbing up the ladder?
It was, man. And I, you know, I still feel almost a sense of guilt for that, you know, because Nancy and I sat down early on, and she's extremely talented. And I think she's listening today, so I want to send a shout out to her. She's extremely talented, much smarter than I am. She's much more patient. She's much more sort of, you know, understanding. And for all those reasons, I think it was probably best that she started with our children at home at first. But it was a conscious decision that we made. We knew that, you know, financially having a single income would be more difficult than having a dual income. But we both benefited from having our mothers in the home early on, at least. And there was a plan. And in fact, we're in that transition plan now for her, you know, to sort of be out in the workforce more because our kids are getting older. But yeah, it was a sacrifice, man. And I can't emphasize enough the sacrifice that Nancy made. But yet, I think, you know, our society has also, you know, has made it very difficult for women when they look at their own role, right? That they have to choose between motherhood or careers. And I wish that wasn't the case, right? I wish it was different. I wish we did more to say, look, if you you can do both. It's tough. And that's where I think our role as fathers, you know, to step in and sort of, and create an environment where perhaps we could be home more with our kids while we balance those early years of childhood. But it's just not, you know, that we're not there yet. So we have some work to do. But yeah, Nancy has been a champion and really, I think our children have really benefited from that.
That's awesome. Is there anything that you would say? I mean, you have girls, and you spoke about the roles and the challenges that women have being mothers and professionals. Like, how do you have those conversations with your daughters?
Yeah, man. So being a girl dad, right? You know, first of all, man, I love it. I love having girls, man. They, yeah, I never would have imagined when they were babies that I would have as much fun, you being a father to young women. It's been awesome, man. And my girls are so different from each other. My oldest daughter, Maiva, she's sort of, she already has a PhD on chilling, chill with the best of them. She's got a great temperament. She doesn't get mad. She just chills, and it's going to serve her really well, as she goes into adulthood. She's bright. She's in our health academy here at the school, and is going to look at a career in the medical field. And my sixth grader, Naomi, man, she is a firecracker, competitive as the day is long, hates to lose. I coach her, man. I'm her coach in soccer and basketball, and they're so different, the two of them. But what I love, man, is that, one thing that I hope is that through our relationship, as they go into their own relationships down the road, that hopefully they can see, the relationship that Nancy and I have hopefully as a good model for them, as they go into their own relationships. We do talk quite a bit, about societal roles and things that they're going to be encountering as women, and hopefully what we're teaching them is that, look, you can have both career, you can have family if you choose to have a family. Here are the benefits of having a family, but here are the challenges of having a family. Especially with our older daughter, as she's getting ready to go into college, for me, it's scary because I still see her as this young child, you know what I mean? And they just grow up in front of you so quickly, that I have to remember, okay, she's 18 now. She's almost 18. She's almost an adult. And all of us here have memories of when we were 18 as if it was yesterday, right? So I have to check myself in how I parent her, because, it's different than the way I parent my 3-year-old, and it's different than the way I parent my 6th grader. So hopefully, again, as parents, we have given them the right sort of frameworks to think about the role that they will play in society as women, but they're strong, man. I'm grateful for the influence that their mother has, because my wife she is willful and strong and thoughtful, and I think my sense is that they're gonna be just like her.
Your wife also said, "Don't forget about your sisters."
Yeah. Oh, she's commenting. Oh, listen. Yes.
Welcome to my world, buddy. Yeah, this is what happens to me.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, I'm glad she is, man. No, well, yeah, and that's, my daughters have 4 strong, beautiful aunts on my side, and on Nancy's side, Nancy has 2 sisters as well. So they're surrounded by females that are strong, that have a sense of worth, that have a sense of identity. They all have experience, within that group of women. They've experienced hard things. They've experienced divorce. They've experienced, really challenging health conditions. They've experienced both success in careers, and they've also experienced, failures. So that I feel like, that my daughters are surrounded by strong females who have had a lot of experience that also, play a pivotal role. It's sort of, when you read about elephants, man, I don't know if you guys have read about elephants, but there's a fascinating sort of dynamic in the role that females play in taking care of the young, man. And I feel my daughters have that sort of strength, around them. And I'm grateful for that.
So I got to ask you too, you're a dad, you're a girl dad.
That's right.
It sounds like one of your older daughters ready to leave the bubble, and like, how do you deal with that?
Man, I'm preparing, man. It's emotional, I'm fortunate enough to be her principal, which, I don't know if y'all have had the opportunity to have your children in your school, if they're quite there yet, Jose, maybe. And I got to tell you, it is one of the coolest things, man. How many parents get a chance to go to work every day with their children, in essence, right? And as a leader, it puts you in the spot where you're going to say, man, I got to make this school, the best school, because my kids are coming here. So it adds a level of accountability that I don't need anybody coming to tell me what I need to do with my school to make it good, because I'm doing it for my own kids as well. But yeah, in terms of her transition into adulthood, first of all, I feel I have a really good relationship with her. You know, we talk a lot. She's very good. Last night we were having a conversation about friends and just how friends shift and transition, and friend groups transition. And she's emotionally mature enough to have that conversation with me, saying, look, Dad, some of my friends, man, I'm having some tension with them, and I don't, how do you deal with that? I mean, that's fantastic. We talk about, a career a lot. I have to remember that I'm not her principal when I'm at home. And that's probably the hardest thing. And my wife does a good job at reminding me of that. Cause sometimes I don't take off my principal hat when I'm at home, and I do have to check myself. I'm sure y'all have had that experience. But what I'm trying to do right now in terms of her transition, Tim, is really try to just forge that relationship so that she knows as she transitions into adulthood that she's got a father that she can always count on in terms of advice, connection. And if it's just simply, if she just wants to talk, then hopefully I can be that for her.
Awesome.
So Fidel, I have a daughter. She's a sophomore in college now.
Ooh.
And
You're too young, John. I mean, you look like you're a sophomore in college, man.
I started early like you, Fidel. But one of the conversations that I have with her, because like yourself, I grew up in poverty, and I was lucky enough to be in a position where I could provide my daughter a better life. And so there's not a day that goes by where I'm not thankful for the gifts and talents that I have, but I've also all the blessings that I've been given throughout life. And there's a saying, there's nothing worse than wasted talent, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you have that conversation with your 18-year-old daughter? Because you're a prime example of someone that didn't waste the opportunity that was provided to him, and you capitalized on everything that came your way. Like, how do you have that conversation now as a dad with your oldest daughter?
A lot of that, John, is a lot of reflection now. When Maiva entered high school and junior high, she struggled, bro. She struggled, and I can say that sort of here in a show like this because she's open about it, which again speaks about her maturity now. But when she was in 8th grade, man, we had to pull her out her last quarter of her 8th grade year because she was emotionally just really not in a good place. I mean, part of that was adolescence. I mean, there's so much stuff going through these kids, sort of emotional bandwidth at that age that, it was a tough year for her. And her freshman year, she did some therapy and got some skills that I think really helped. And then her freshman year, it was still sort of a struggle, man. But by now, she has gone through this incredible transformation. I'm so proud of her, right? As a father, there's dads that are probably proud of their children for winning championship games. For me, Maiva is winning right now at the game of life, if you may. She's mature, like I say, she's confident. As I mentioned, she's in this in our probably one of our most challenging academic academies in the school. And now we can have a conversation, and she'll be like, "Dad, man, when I was 14, holy cow," you know what I'm saying? And she's doing the self-reflection, man, which there's nothing more powerful than that. So I think that sort of skill that she's developed now is paying dividends in a significant way. And she's actually probably my best coach for my 14-year-old son. And she'll tell him, "Tane, you should be involved in high school. I didn't get involved in some things early, and this is how it impacted me." And she has that level of sort of depth and that level of maturity to do that. And for me, that's perhaps one of the best skills that she's developed that will pay off in huge ways as she's going into adulthood. And so that that gives me a certain level of comfort, right?
Awesome. Well, listen, Fidel, we're kind of ending the end of the show.
Already, man?
Up against
Jeez,
the time.
man,
yeah. But so is there any parting advice that you want to give any of the young fathers out there, or any parents at all? Any words that resonate with you that you want to share with the world?
Well, yeah. So, gosh, my wife and I were having a conversation the other day where that made me think about a mentor of mine that I had in New York. His name was Tom Sobel, and I don't know if you guys have heard the name Tom Sobel. At one point, he was the chancellor of New York, of all of New York schools. And he was, I was blessed enough to be in one of his courses at Columbia that he taught on ethics. And I got to tell you, one of the most impactful classes I've ever had. And he often talked about what it meant to be ethical, what it meant to be moral. And in fact, there's a speech that maybe I'll forward it to you guys so you guys can get your hands on that, where he talks about this. But he talks about that as human beings, we don't become ethical and we don't become moral by being moralistic, right? He says you become ethical and you become moral by engaging in the messiness of life. And sometimes that's really hard, man, especially as a parent, when you're frustrated, when you don't know, you don't know what you're doing, you don't have answers to sort of all this stuff that's going through, you're dealing with your own emotions, and you can either sort of, step away from them or just sort of embrace it and say, look, let me deal with this messiness. Let me get some help. Let me talk to others. Let me get some perspective. And I think when you do that, that's when you become sort of, a better version of yourself. So to all the young dads out there, man, that are listening, when it gets tough, man, there's going to come moments where you just sort of want to pull away, where you want to pull away from your children, or you want to pull away from your spouse, or sometimes where the only emotion that comes out is like anger at your kids. And listen, that's normal. We've all have had it. The question is, do you embrace that sort of that messiness and become a better version of yourself, and get the right help for it, right? Find some mentors that can help. These types of podcasts are great. Like I mentioned, the therapy thing, man, get into that stuff and have it work for you. So, I guess engage the messiness is what I would say.
Well, listen, dads, I don't want to end without, giving the co-hosts an opportunity to ask any parting questions. You guys have anything? Jose, Tim, Mike?
I have one last question. What was your nickname?
When I was younger?
That your dad
Well,
gave you?
I don't know if I can repeat that. You mean for my dad?
Yeah.
Well, Jose will appreciate this. I think it was cabron, but I don't know if that was a nickname.
It wasn't Mocoso by any chance? El Mocoso?
Yeah, geez, man.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, this is great, everybody. I appreciate you. This is the bubble of love. We've talked about this before. It's therapy for us. I'm happy when we come together as
awesome,
co-hosts and tell our stories. I'm glad you joined us today. Thank you for being here. Can't wait for next week when, Mike goes on location to host the next show. Can't wait to see where he goes.
Right.
We'll see. I got something up my sleeve.
So listen, I just want to thank National Parents Union for giving us this platform, but most importantly, Fidel, thank you. I know it was a quick turnaround for you to be on the show. Your story is amazing and inspiring, just as we heard it would be from Jose. And we thank you so much for your time today, man.
Thank you. This was great. This was a pleasure, man. Let's keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. Yeah, we look forward to you sending us that speech. I'm really interested in reading that.
Okay,
sure.
That's good, man.
Thanks.
All right. You guys take care.
All right. That was great, guys.
Good job, guys.